Hello, welcome to Patrick's Corner. Today we're going to talk about some good news out of Ukraine. It seems that the thick-headed Ukrainians and the thick-headed Russians have decided, with a little help from Turkey, that maybe they should let some of that grain out of their elevators. Right now, Ukraine is preparing for, for, for harvesting this year's crop. So they have to export last year's crop. The Russians are in the same boat. If they don't export, they'll start getting blue mold in their storage facilities, and you don't want that if you're a farmer. You want to get your grain into the out of the silos and out of the storage and onto the ships and sending it out into the Mediterranean and into the world. Erdogan is trying to talk sense into thunkheads. You know, Turkey has the same problem. They also depend upon Ukrainian and Russian wheat. China does. There's not one country, except probably for the United States and Canada, that has enough supplies. Also, Russia's going to start shipping out fertilizer. Oh, you're going to say, well, why don't they just use natural fertilizer? Because they can't. It isn't as effective as potash. The potash fertilizers work best. Even the United States is out. We're running out of fertilizer. We're running out of seed for planting, and we're going to have the same situation. Like the little town I live in Trona, we used to produce potash for fertilizer. It is one of those rare elements that we make out here in the desert. We're probably going to start ramping up again, because as long as this war keeps going on, we're going to have to deliver potash to the farm and fertilizer for the Midwest. They can't grow without it because their soil is depleted. They need to build it up. One of the ideas of they're not going to be planting as much corn this year because corn needs fertilizer. Soybeans really don't, because they produce their own fertilizer. They put a lot of nitrates into the ground, because with crop rotation, every farmer plants at least every other harvest, every other planting, he puts in soybeans. Sunflowers are good too. You're going to see a lot more sunflowers this year. You're going to see a lot more soybean. And we're not going to see as much corn. When corn goes down, corn is in almost every product. It's in your cereal, corn syrup. It's in your animal feed. You know, most cows and horses have four stomachs. Their best use of those is through grass, alfalfa, and the rest. But there's not enough. Okay, let's go back to Ukraine. Erdogan has done something that I think is magnificent, and if it works, maybe he should be thought of as getting a Nobel Prize for peace, because he's talking to two thunkheads. And if you think Vladimir Putin is some genius, he is in a way, but he's also a stubborn goat, and he doesn't like doing anything he doesn't like. He wants to take eastern Ukraine. The eastern Ukrainians also want the Russians there. Now, the western Ukrainians, the Catholics and the others, they're trying to drive them out, and they proclaim that they want Crimea back. Well, Crimea has been Russian for 214 years. They've also fought 3 wars over it. The first one was the taking it from the Ottoman Empire. The second was the Crimean War from 1854 to 1856. And the only reason they won in Crimea was because they took St. Petersburg, or they were in the process of taking the capital of Russia at that time. It wasn't Moscow, it was St. Petersburg. So they came to a formalization. That's how come we got Alaska. The Russians needed to raise money to pay war reparations. Why are you giving money to a bunch of Muslims? Well, the British and the French, we got to help those poor Ottoman Muslims who had slaves and the other stuff. Right. And they still had slaves when the British and the French were there. But the point was that they didn't want Russia to be too strong. And because the Balkans were the freedom land that they were trying to promote. You've got the poet Byron, who's trying to free Greece from the Ottomans. Okay. Now we have another situation. We're starting to see some logic behind it. But then again, our wonderful president, Mr. Biden, is a dope. He's going to give them $230 million in aid, military. Now they also need $750 million to rebuild their country. Where is that money going to come from? Of course, the American taxpayer, who's a dope. Okay, I cannot inform you enough of the simple fact that there's a country called Ukraine that has pushed and pushed for the idea of joining NATO and the EU. If they had joined the EU, that would not have been too much of a problem. But they want to join NATO. So far, we've got the Finns are wanting to go and join NATO. The Swedes want to join NATO. All the Baltics have already joined. You've got Denmark, who wanted to kind of put both feet, one foot in and one foot out. They've decided that they're going to do it too. Why is this important to the United States? Because all of those guys now have to buy weapons. Believe it or not, the German Navy didn't have any operating submarines. Can you imagine the country that came up with U-boat warfare doesn't have any submarines? Well, that's a fact. So they're buying submarines. They're rebuilding their military. Because their military went to Afghanistan, they wore all their equipment out, and now suddenly they're going to build up more. Now, my question is, Russia was their largest trading partner. The Russians sold them oil and natural gas, and the Germans sold them precision tooling, machinery, and everything else. Now they're not doing that because we have an embargo. Embargoes really don't work. Look at Cuba. Look at Iran. Look at wonderful North Korea. The only one that has done anything to has been the people of those countries. And Biden thinks, oh my God, well, those Russians are going to rise up. Well, let me clue you in. The guy who talks to people who aren't there. Mr. Biden, you don't know Russian history if you think they're going to collapse. They're not. It's in their gene pool. You tell them that they can't do anything. There was when you finally left Russia with your invasion force in 1922, you put in an embargo on the sale of equipment and supplies to Russia. That didn't work because then another 10 years later, in 1929, you had the Great Depression, and suddenly all those illustrious capitalists like Henry Ford, Alfred Kahn was the designer of factories. They weren't building any in the United States. So where did he go? He went to the Soviet Union. Same thing with Henry Ford. These guys follow the dollar. They don't care about politics or anything else. The Koch brothers' daddy went to Russia too to sell oil supplies. It's the amazing thing about these people. They're going to go where the money is. The money. Okay? And so we got this war going on because nobody was thinking that Vladimir Putin was pissed. Well, he's been trying to explain it to you for 10 years and you didn't want to listen. So he decided he's going to give you a point of reason. The trouble is, it wasn't a reasonable thing to do, but so far the Russian people have not been hurt by the sanctions. There's still enough food on the shelves. They've simply changed their commodities. The fancier stuff, that's going to be harder to come by. But you know what? North Korea gets theirs. You have Modi in India selling Russian oil at an extreme profit, and they're building this money up. And pretty soon, if things get hard and fast, you're going to see countries all over the world that are going to bring stuff in. Let's give you an example. In 2014, they closed off the fish to the Soviet Union. And suddenly, Chile got fish sent to them from Northern Europe. The Northern Europe got paid. The Chileans were middlemen, and then they sent it back to Russia because they didn't follow the sanctions. Same thing's going to happen. I'd like to see peace in that country. I'm tired of the idea that people are dying, that people are being told to leave their homes in their country. 3.5 million Ukrainians, they didn't go to Poland. They went back to Russia because they're Russian speakers. They left Ukraine. The Russian populations have left the Donbass area because it's dangerous to be in a war zone. And they're working in they're working in Russia. Now, please, can we get some idea here about what can be done? What we can be doing is maybe holding a peace conference and sort of settling this amicably. The Russians will pay the Ukrainians for their eastern territories and Crimea. The Ukrainians will be able to keep Odessa and the rest. And they will be able to rebuild our country. Now, that makes sense to me. But are we pushing that? No. We have the Ukrainians. We're going to drive those Russians out. Right. So far, you're losing 300 to 500 men a day. You have 20 million people, 40 million people, and about a third of those are males. Now, you lose all your male population. What are you going to do then? So come on, guys. Use your heads. Hold a conference, get a peace agreement down, and then don't mess with each other. All right, that's it for today. I hope you subscribe and like. Have a nice Saturday. Bye-bye.